Donnie, read and written by Samuel Chase. Elementary students scattered out of their classrooms. Some steered into the cafeteria, recess, and others huddled into their groups in the hallways, chatting about the week's news. I stepped out of recess and squeezed through the river of students. I made it to my friends in my usual meeting spot at the water fountain. As I stumbled from the stream, Judy and Linda greeted me with a wave. I was in the middle of complaining about Mrs. Brown's science project when something foul smothered my nose. Linda scrunched her face. Ew, what's that smell? We followed the odor back to a boy a few lockers down from our group. It was a kid the whole school knew by mere smell alone. His name was Donnie. Donnie shuffled along the wall toward my group. A striped polo drooped over the small boy's frame. Stains splotched every corner of him, and grease caked Donnie's floppy hair. The worst, though, was the smell. It was an awful salad blend of 100-year-old cigarettes and rotten eggs. Most kids stayed clear of Donnie, trying their best to hold their breath and survive passing him. The others who decided to notice him would be ugly about it. Judy glared at Donnie. Ugh, there he is again. She pinched her nose. Smells like the dump behind the cafeteria. Linda giggled and said, Donnie probably sleeps there. I laughed with the rest of the girls, jeering, but something pinched my heart. I shouldn't have laughed at that. I didn't have anything against Donnie, but I sure didn't like that smell. As he sauntered past us, I caught my tongue as the rest of the girls piled on insults. The period bell cut my friend's abuse off. We all glanced at each other, then ran toward our classroom. Our friends and I squeezed in with the last of the other students as the final bell rang. I bent over, trying to catch my breath, when something foul clogged my throat. I turned and spotted Donnie on the other side of the classroom. The small crowd of students made a wide circle around him. Some of them fought to hold their breath, while others pulled their shirts up, creating an impromptu gas mask. Across the classroom, the words, "Welcome to your first day in 6th grade," covered the green chalkboard. A tall man with slick-backed hair stood by a large desk to the side of the chalkboard. He adjusted his square glasses, then straightened his back.
Welcome, class. My name is Mr. Clarkson. If you all please stand by the chalkboard, I will give you all your assigned seats.
Everyone shuffled to the front of the room. The teacher called out names one by one and pointed to the empty desks. After calling a few students from the group, Mr. Clarkson pointed to the second row of desks.
Donnie.
The greasy kid shuffled over to his chair as he quietly sat. Mr. Clarkson next said,
Kevin.
And pointed to the desk next to Donnie. A short kid with black hair groaned loud enough for everyone to hear. Kevin said,
Oh, come on. Do I have to sit next to this walking trash bag?
A few snickers spilled from the remaining group. Mr. Clarkson snapped his fingers at Kevin.
Enough. Take your seat.
Kevin rolled his eyes and dragged himself into the assigned chair. He pinched his nose at Donnie and scooted his chair a few inches away. Donnie's face turned red. He crumpled onto his desk. Mr. Clarkson called my name and pointed to the desk on the other side of Donnie. A group of children stared at me with solemn faces. My friends whispered their condolences behind me. The way they stared, you'd think I was being hauled off to the principal's office. I frowned. I didn't like the idea of being suffocated by rotten eggs for the whole year, but with how everyone was acting, and especially Kevin's outburst, Donnie had already been through enough. I swallowed my complaints and stepped toward my seat. As I sat, the odor curled into my nose and settled at the back of my throat. I fought my twisting stomach. I wanted to beg Mr. Clarkson to move me, but I shoved my complaints back down. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't going to hurt Donnie. When September slipped into October, the school's heater decided to throw in the towel. In response to the untimely death, the principal rolled out old radiators to keep the students from freezing into popsicles. The cold crept in through the classroom's windows and crawled across the room. Our pitiful radiator rattled and coughed in the corner, barely warming any kid who sat more than 3 feet from it. I squeezed my jacket tight and tried my best to keep my teeth from chattering. The students around me were bundled up in scarves and thick wool jackets. Some even doubled up on t-shirts and socks just to survive the cold. Donnie, on the other hand, struggled to keep his body from shivering out of his chair. All he had for warmth was an old leather coat, stiffed with age and worn with threads. Other than that, the poor kid wore the same shorts and shoes he had since the start of the year. Mr. Clarkson stood at the front of the room. Today's lesson was preparing us for the upcoming test on Friday. The teacher periodically jabbed his finger toward random students and demanded answers to his questions. Many of them chattered out correct answers with a few misses here and there. Then Mr. Clarkson pointed to Donnie and asked,
What country helped America win the Revolutionary War?
The entire class shifted to the freezing kid. Donnie slowly rose from his seat. He glanced around the room while squeezing the hems of his jacket.
Mexico?
An awkward pause set in the room. Then Kevin snorted.
Mexico? It's France, stupid.
The class followed Kevin's remarks with a chorus of snickers. Donnie pursed his lips and sank into his chair. Mr. Clarkson's eyes snapped to the rest of the students, killing all sound. He said,
We do not laugh at each other, ever.
Mr. Clarkson turned to the chalkboard.
The correct answer is France. Remember that, Donnie.
Mr. Clarkson kept on with the lesson, but my heart stayed behind with Donnie. I didn't laugh at the other students, but I also didn't speak up. The lunch bell cut Mr. Clarkson off mid-question a few minutes later. Before he could get out his usual end of the class speech, everyone ran into the hallway. Mr. Clarkson drew his lips in a line, gathered some papers, and headed out the door with the last of the stragglers. I collected my things, and as I turned to leave, Donnie caught my eye. He still sat at the desk. The boy hovered over today's worksheet, frowning at questions that stared back at him. Judy and Linda stopped at the classroom door. Judy turned to me. Hey, you coming? I glanced at them, and then back to Donnie. The boy needed help with the paper, but someone else could help him, right? Looking around, no one else was there but me, Donnie, and my friends. I knew Judy and Linda wouldn't help, so I left one person. Me. My stomach groaned as I glanced back at the door. I had forgotten to eat breakfast that morning because I woke up late, but my heart brought me back to the boy sitting next to me. I turned to my friends. I think I'll stay back. I've got some stuff I need to finish. I set my books down. Judy shrugged. All right. Linda said, I'll save your spot. The two girls disappeared past the door. I took in a breath, then stepped to Donnie's desk. You need any help? Donnie glanced at me, his shoulders pulled to his ears, his face tightened as if he was bracing himself. I pointed to the question, smeared with eraser marks. I'm pretty sure it's B. The boy stared at the question. B? Yeah, General Charles Earl Cornwallis was the British general who surrendered at Yorktown. I pulled over my chair and sat. Donnie slowly nodded. Okay. We walked together through the worksheet. Donnie followed my words carefully, repeating bits under his breath as though he was trying to pin them into his mind. The end of the period bell rang as we finished his worksheet. My stomach groaned in annoyance. I sighed and stood with my things. I'll have to power through the rest of the day. I'll just have to ask Mom for a bigger dinner tonight. Donnie smiled shyly. Thanks. A warmth washed over me at seeing his smile. Even though I didn't get to eat, it felt good to see Donnie happy for once. I smiled back. You're welcome, Donnie. From then on, I tried to help him where I could. A few months later, my friends and I were standing in the lunch line. We had unfortunately gotten out of class late because Mr. Clarkson rambled on about another vital test coming up. All we ever did was study just to pass another test, only to do it all over again and again. So here we were, way in the back of the line, right next to the cafeteria entrance. Worst of all, my friends and I were stuck behind Kevin and his gang. They were being rowdy and loud as usual. We tried our best to ignore them. As the line meandered along, I caught sight of the unmistakable scraggly hair of Donnie at the front of the line. He hadn't changed much, but every time we saw each other, Donnie would give me a shy smile. Donnie stepped out of line with a food tray in hand. He walked down the lunch line to his usual seat near the gymnasium door. Kevin leaned from his pack. He nudged his buddies as he spotted his favorite victim. A nervousness twisted my stomach. Kevin was about to pull something again. As Donnie passed, Kevin stepped out and pushed the kid over. Donnie stumbled, but caught himself. However, he couldn't save his tray. Donnie's sandwich, a pile of tater tots, and a sealed milk carton spilled onto the white tile. The kids standing in the line laughed, others just stared. Kevin smirked.
Oops, sorry. I nearly passed out from your steak.
My friends shook their heads. Judy said,
That's just mean.
Donnie bent down and picked up his food. Tears filled his eyes. Heat flared into my chest. Without thinking, I stomped into Kevin's view.
Knock it off, Kevin. You're not funny.
Kevin blinked several times with his mouth open.
What?
Both groups stared as I knelt and helped Donnie. I said,
Sorry, Donnie. I think if you go to the lunch lady and tell her what happened, she'll give you a new tray.
Donnie wiped the tears from his face and nodded. He stood and then stepped to the back of the line. He didn't say anything. The boy barely looked at me. However, when Donnie walked away, he stood a little taller. I stepped back in line with my friends. An awkward silence settled over Kevin and his friends. A few of them glanced back at me and then to Kevin. None of them said anything. They just shuffled with the rest of the line. Linda raised an eyebrow.
Why'd you do that?
I huffed and said,
I just don't like seeing Donnie get bullied like that. It's not right.
Judy smiled. I thought you were about to knock the snot out of Kevin there for a second. Linda grinned. Yeah, just one hit and he's lights out. We all laughed as the lunch line wound on. As the school years passed, I had different teachers and classrooms, but somehow I always found myself seated near Donnie. I never really understood why. Not then, at least. It wasn't until I was an adult that I realized something. One of the spiritual gifts God had given me was mercy, and He allowed me to display His mercy to Donnie. When my own children were starting to think about college, my husband and I sat at our kitchen table. The projected cost of tuition, their housing, and our own bills covered the old maple. We both knew his income alone wouldn't be enough, especially not with the 3 kids and the rising cost of living. So, after much prayer and a bit of nervous excitement, I returned to my first job, teaching. And wouldn't you know it, the Lord didn't send me to just any classroom. He positioned me to help the children who had learning difficulties. For 10 years, I sat beside students who struggled to read, who stumbled over math problems, who needed more patience than most could give, and they all reminded me of Donnie. Our elementary school class's 40th reunion was coming up. We did our best to send out invitations to everyone we could find. A few of us met early in Dallas to prepare everything a day before the reunion. I found my old friends, Judy and Linda. Both had gotten married and were living full lives. We laughed over the faded photos we had brought to the display at the reunion. And then the day of the reunion arrived. Texas blazed out one of its hottest days of the summer, where the heat danced off the pavement. Inside the church, where the reunion was being held, it was cool and full of joy. People shared stories, caught up on lost time, and wrapped each other in hugs. I even saw and chatted with Kevin. The man brought his Sunday best with an expensive suit and tie. Kevin had landed himself a good job as a studio executive in Hollywood, something he made sure everyone knew. The front double doors opened, and in walked Donnie. The man hadn't changed much since I last saw him. He still had those same shuffling steps and an uncertain smile. Donnie was soaked head to toe in sweat. Turned out, he had taken 3 different buses from his assisted living home just to step into these doors. As Donnie shuffled into the building, I heard the Lord speak quietly to my heart. Sally, you've hugged everyone in this room. Are you gonna hug Donnie? I answered in my spirit, Dear Lord, I will. I walked up and wrapped my arms around Donnie. When we parted, the front of my dress was soaked through with his sweat. It was gross. However, the man's smile washed away my annoyance. Something changed in the room. That one small obedient act made it easier for everyone else to follow. One by one, old classmates stepped up to Donnie. They shook his hand, they hugged him, they'd asked how he'd been. Kevin stepped from the crowd. He looked down at Donnie. Donnie glanced up at the taller man. His shoulders hiked up, and took that posture of that old boy from years ago. Kevin took in a breath and smiled. He wrapped his arms around the man. "It's good to see you, Donnie." After Kevin stepped back, Donnie stood there, grinning ear to ear. When it came time for Donnie to leave and catch his first bus home, he made one last stop at the refreshments table. He picked up a small stack of napkins and wrapped up a big hunk of cake with them. Then he wandered over to the bulletin board where he displayed all the old photos. He started pulling them down one by one. The first he pulled was the group shot of our 6th grade class, and then he grabbed the one with Mr. Clarkson's room, where all of us were squinting into the sun during field day. Donnie continued to pull more and more pictures from the wall, recess snapshots, birthday parties, and so on. We watched in silence as he gathered a pile of them in his hand. I felt Judy nudge me and saw Linda's eyes widen. A lot of those pictures came from our personal albums, but none of us said a word, because deep down we all knew those pictures would mean more to Donnie than they ever would to us. As Donnie made his way to the door, you would have thought the whole reception had been held in his honor. He beamed as we all waved and said our goodbyes. Joy radiated from him like a boy who'd finally been invited to sit at the table after years of watching from the edge. Donnie finally received what he had longed for most as a child. Love and the kind of respect that should have been his all along. So, thank you for listening to that. Now I'll move on to the devotional part of this. There are only 3 points I go through whenever I'm doing some Bible study or devotional. It's first one is, what's the story's message? And this is basically just looking at the story and trying to pull what the author is trying to tell us, or at least displaying within it in the story. I think a message we can pull from my grandmother's story is that we're supposed to show the same compassion and mercy that Christ showed. To love and care for the ones who are often overlooked, ignored, or even mocked. Because that's exactly what Jesus did for you and me. Next point is, what is God saying to me? So basically it's taking the message and trying to look at my life and where can it be applied specifically. So for me, I think it's God saying to not walk past those who are broken or different. To stop, see them through his eyes, and love them with Christ's heart and not mine. Just think about how Jesus reached out to the people that everyone else avoided in the Bible. So he touched the lepers in Mark chapter 1. He sat down and ate with the people the Jews would consider complete outcast in Luke 5. So that's the heart of God, is he stepped into people's lives instead of backing away like the world would. So this is the last point, is what will I do now? So it's taking the message and then where I think God's trying to apply it, and then what are some steps I can take with all this put together. I think I will ask God to open my eyes to the Donnies he's placed around me. Asking him for the courage to show his compassion, not focusing on the cost that might come with stepping out, but instead seeing them as Christ sees that person. And trusting that when I fail, Christ never does. Because when we love the Donnies, we're really loving Jesus himself. Matthew 25:40. The king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Thank you. And as always, God bless.